Zen wisdom for letting go of perfectionism and mental exhaustion. You are lying awake right now conducting a harsh internal prosecution, interrogating yourself over a minor slip of patience, a hasty comment spoken hours ago, or a small daily mistake that your mind has magnified into a terrifying character flaw. Maybe you spent moments today feeling secretly fraudulent, listening to a cold internal voice that scolds you for failing to be perfectly compassionate, selfless, or calm, terrified that any human roughness inside you proves you are spiritually broken. The atmosphere surrounding your bed tonight is cool, grounded, and deeply protective. The subtle mineral aromas of damp granite dust, mountain spring water, fresh pine shavings, and wild moss drift softly through the room, while the solid mattress beneath you supports your weary spine, offering a quiet, thick-walled quarry shed that asks no artificial polish from your soul. Dear friend, this exhausting habit of moral self-policing does not mean your character is defective, nor does it mean you are fundamentally unfit to walk a spiritual path. You are merely like a tired apprentice stonecutter sitting in a cold quarry, desperately grinding a bronze chisel against raw mountain slate to scrub away its natural mineral veins. You do not have to eradicate every human roughness before morning arrives, nor do you need to force your mind into a state of flawless purity to earn complete rest tonight. Your spirit is not a ruined sculpture waiting to be polished into dust, and nothing in this quiet room expects you to present a flawless stone to the world. Right now, you are gently invited to set down your heavy tools, allowing your raw, unpolished nature to rest safely on the broad bedrock of the present moment. A surprising, deeply comforting truth emerges from ancient Buddhist reflection. When we face the exhaustion of moral perfectionism, we often treat spiritual growth as an aggressive grinding process, imagining that if we could only polish away every internal flaw, we would finally become worthy of peace. Yet contemplative wisdom shows us that true integrity is never found in an artificial paper-thin polish, but in the structural strength of unground slate. A broad slab of mountain stone resting in a high pass does not shatter under heavy snow because it is perfectly smooth. It bears immense weight precisely because its natural mineral veins and raw textures remain intact, holding the rock together in organic wholeness. True spiritual purity is not the total absence of human roughness. It is the realization that your living core holds its load effortlessly without needing to be ground down to dust. The panicked mind mistakenly insists that stopping your internal self-prosecution is an act of dangerous spiritual laziness. It endlessly audits every thought and reaction, attempting to force your raw human nature into a rigid ideal, convincing you that relaxing your vigilance will lead to moral collapse. But a high stone quarry perched beside a mountain stream does not struggle to erase the dark grain lines running through its slate ledges. It simply holds the rock in cool, solid security, trusting that the raw stone will carry every traveler who walks across the pass. Think of how much vital, sacred energy you have burned by trying to grind away your natural human grain in the dark. Maybe you have felt this too, lying awake with a tight throat and a restless mind, demanding to know why you could not remain perfectly patient, fearing that any internal frustration makes you an imposter, feeling utterly trapped in a courtroom of your own making, trying to refine your spirit by aggressively scolding yourself in the middle of the night, only leaves your hands raw and your heart exhausted. What if, for these quiet hours, we set down the bronze chisel and the polishing grit? What if we allow your awareness to rest like a broad slab of raw mountain slate resting upon cool earth tonight? Let the small, guarded muscles around your eyes, forehead, and jaw soften completely. Release the tight grip you have been holding in your shoulders, your chest, and your throat. Feel the broad, unyielding support beneath your body, carrying the full, heavy weight of your bones without asking you to prove your moral perfection tonight. Listen to the long, quiet cadence of your breath, moving through your lungs, slow, smooth, and completely unhurried in the darkness. There is no need to audit your motives or correct your character. Let your breath move like cool mountain water flowing over uncarved river slate, steady, clean, and entirely at ease. Perhaps you learned early in life to view your value through the lens of flawless performance, building a habit of intense self-criticism whenever your human roughness showed through. In the tradition of Zen wisdom, We do not view your perfectionist shame as an irredeemable defect that must be punished away. It is seen as a protective, well-meaning impulse that has simply overreached its quiet boundary. You do not need to become a flawless saint to be worthy of profound sleep tonight. You need only to permit your spirit to yield to the broad bedrock beneath you, so that every breath you draw becomes a gentle act of trust in your raw, unpolished wholeness. In a short while, we will travel to a cool slate quarry shed perched beside a roaring mountain stream, where a young stonecutter sits coughing in dust because he fears a natural mineral vein will ruin his work. But right now, let your physical frame yield to the simple, unconditional security of this quiet room. The walls around you are solid, keeping out the cold alpine draft, and the dark air here is a calm, neutral shelter that permits your tired mind to drop its harsh verdicts. You do not have to earn your sleep, fix your flaws, or guarantee your moral purity before dawn arrives. Your true strength was never dependent on an artificial polish. Your life was born like a raw slab of mountain slate, fully equipped with the solid, natural integrity needed to carry every load, meet every storm, and endure through every shift of the terrain. Let the tight contraction around your ribs melt away entirely. Let your fingers uncurl slowly upon the bed, your hands soft and still like cool, unpolished stone resting in dark earth. There is no moral court you must face in this dark room tonight, no self-punishment you must execute, and no inner flaw heavy enough to break the solid bedrock of your presence right now. You have reached the end of the day's harsh trial, and your present stone vault is completely solid enough to carry your rest. As we move deeper into the quiet night ahead, remember that your true nature is like raw mountain slate resting in a high pass. It does not lose its inherent load-bearing power when a dark mineral line runs through its core. The shifting judgments of your internal prosecutor can drift past your mind, leaving your central spirit grounded, whole, and profoundly safe in the quiet dark. Let the tired muscles around your neck and spine melt into the darkness. Let your legs grow heavy and motionless upon the bed, your ankles and feet loose and completely supported by the mattress. There is no ethical audit you must pass in this room tonight, no perfectionist shame you must carry alone, and no human roughness heavy enough to disturb the solid stone resting beneath your spirit right now. You are resting inside your own uncarved sanctuary, and your present bedrock is completely calm enough for you to lay down your chisel. Up in the mist-draped gorge of the western cliff, where the high quarry cutters shaped flagstones for the mountain road, the cool midnight air smelled constantly of wet slate dust, fresh pine shavings, crushed mountain thyme, and cold spring water. Working as an apprentice stonecutter in this quiet mountain shed was a young man named Taro, who carried an agonizing, secret horror of his own internal imperfection. Having grown up under a strict, unforgiving guardian who punished every minor slip with harsh isolation, Taro believed that any moral stumble, any fleeting moment of anger, or any natural human roughness made him fundamentally ruined. He convinced himself that unless his spirit became as smooth and unblemished as polished glass, he would remain an imposter unworthy of love or spiritual peace. This perfectionist shame drove Taro into an exhausting routine of late-night labor. Long after the senior masons had laid down their hammers and retired to their warm quarters, Taro remained huddled in the dimly lit quarry shed. In his right hand he held a specialized tool, a bronze stone-polishing chisel, fitted with a heavy, worn boxwood handle every night. Taro selected slabs of raw mountain slate intended for the high-pass steps, placing them under his oil lamp. Whenever he spotted a dark mineral vein, a rough gray streak, or a natural grain line running through the slate, a wave of panic hit his chest. He would drive his bronze chisel against the stone with desperate force, attempting to grind away every organic line, scraping and polishing the rock until its surface was completely uniform. On this freezing autumn night, as a harsh alpine wind howled through the timber roof slats, Taro's internal court reached a pitch of total frenzy. Replaying a small moment from earlier in the day when he had spoken with a sharp, impatient tone to a fellow apprentice, Taro felt an intense wave of self-loathing. He viewed that momentary lapse of patience as proof of a corrupt, rotten core. To punish himself and clean his spirit, he seized a large, broad slate flagstone, and set to work with his bronze chisel, scraping the metal tip against a thick, dark mineral vein that ran through the center of the stone. He ground the metal against the slate for hours, his hands caked in white stone grit, his lungs burning from fine dust. Sweat ran down his temples despite the freezing cold, his shoulders locked in a painful, rigid contraction. The dark vein ran deep into the heart of the rock, refusing to vanish. The more Taro gouged and scraped at the surface, the thinner and weaker the flagstone became. He pressed down with all his body weight, driving the bronze chisel furiously against the mineral line, desperate to force the stone into pristine perfection. With a sudden, sickening crack, the flagstone split down the middle. The slate shattered into 3 brittle, jagged pieces across the wooden bench, spraying fine grit into Taro's face. Taro dropped his bronze chisel onto the sawdust floor. He collapsed onto his knees beside the workbench, his body trembling, his hands covered in gray dust. Tears of utter despair welled in his eyes as he looked at the shattered stone. In his mind, that broken flagstone was the ultimate reflection of his own life. He believed he had proven once again that his internal roughness was too severe to be saved, that his attempts to polish his soul were useless, and that he was condemned to shatter under the slightest pressure. Stepping softly through the open doorway of the cutting shed, carrying a small clay lantern, was Master Jin, an old quarry mason who had shaped mountain steps for over 50 years. Master Jin wore a coarse, dark linen smock dusted with gray powder, his face lined like weathered cedar, his eyes holding a vast, unhurried stillness. He had quietly observed Taros that night, grinding for weeks, watching the young man exhaust his strength against the natural grain of the mountain. Master Jin walked over to the kneeling apprentice, his wooden clogs making a soft, rhythmic sound against the stone floor. He did not scold Taro for breaking the flagstone, nor did he offer a light, cheerful speech about making mistakes. Instead, he set his lantern on the bench, knelt beside Taro, and picked up one of the shattered pieces of slate, examining its raw, broken edge in the warm oil light. Master Jin reached behind the workbench and pulled out a fresh, unpolished slab of mountain slate. It was thick, heavy, and completely unground, its surface marked by long, dark mineral veins and rough gray textures. Master Jin set the raw slab across 2 heavy oak timber blocks. He then reached for a massive iron sledgehammer that hung on the wall, a tool used only to test the structural strength of heavy load-bearing steps. He handed the heavy hammer to Taro, asking the young man to stand up, raise the iron hammer with both hands, and strike the center of the unpolished slate with full force. Taro hesitated, his hands shaking, his mind confused. He looked at the rough, unpolished stone with its visible mineral veins, convinced that such an imperfect rock would disintegrate into dust under a heavy blow. Master Jin nodded gently, his voice calm and steady as the mountain stream outside. He asked Taro to trust the test and swing the hammer. Taro wiped the grit from his palms, gripped the wooden handle of the sledgehammer, and swung it down with all his strength. The iron head struck the center of the raw slate with a deafening thud that echoed through the timber rafters. The raw slate did not shatter. It did not crack or splinter along its dark mineral veins. The heavy stone remained completely whole, resting solidly across the oak blocks, absorbing the full impact of the iron hammer without losing a single fragment. Master Jin reached out and placed his weathered hand gently over Taro's wrist, bringing the hammer to rest on the floor. He asked the young man to look closely at the dark mineral veins running through the unbroken stone. Master Jin explained that those dark veins were not flaws, defects, or weaknesses in the slate. They were the very mineral bonds that formed the structural strength of the rock deep inside the mountain. He explained that when Taro used his bronze chisel to grind away those natural lines, he was not cleaning the stone. He was stripping away its organic layers, thinning its body until it had no strength left to hold a load. Master Jin picked up the bronze polishing chisel from the sawdust and held it out toward Taro. He asked the young apprentice if his own human spirit lost its load-bearing power simply because it contained natural lines of emotion, fatigue, or temporary imperfection. Taro stood in the dimly lit shed, his hand touching the cool, raw surface of the unbroken slate. The sound of the mountain stream roared softly outside the timber walls, mingling with the dry aroma of pine shavings and wet stone dust. A profound wave of emotional recognition broke through Taro's chest, loosening a tight, painful knot that had gripped his throat for years. He saw with sudden, overwhelming clarity how his entire life had been spent using a bronze chisel against his own spirit, desperately trying to scrape away his human roughness out of sheer terror. He recognized that his internal prosecution had never made him wiser, kinder, or more spiritual. It had only ground his spirit down to a paper-thin fragility, leaving him exhausted, bleeding, and ready to shatter at the slightest blow. He looked down at his dust-covered hands, feeling the solid, unyielding strength of the unpolished stone beneath his fingers. He realized that the raw slate did not need to be ground into glass to serve the mountain road. Its strength lived inside its natural grain. His breath released in a long, quiet sigh, his tight shoulders dropping away from his ears as a deep relief settled into his bones. Yet as Master Jin hung the sledgehammer back on the wall and turned to leave the shed, a quiet, lingering uncertainty remained in Taro's mind. He had seen the raw slate withstand the iron hammer, but he did not yet know how his mind could stop picking up the bronze chisel. When the cold voices of self-criticism returned in the dark, the alpine wind continued to whistle through the timber slats, and the quarry shed settled back into its cool, quiet darkness, holding the unpolished slate safe and unbroken upon the oak timber blocks. Taro stood alone in the quiet space, holding the raw stone under his palm, wondering how a human heart could learn to lay down its tools and trust its uncarved nature. This quiet realization beside the oak timber blocks does not ask you to numb your spirit, nor does it demand that you become cold and indifferent toward your personal conduct. Contemplative wisdom has never been about turning your heart into an unyielding block of ice, or pretending that human mistakes do not carry weight. It does not expect you to greet a real misstep, a moment of impatience, or an unthinking word with careless apathy. Feeling a sharp sting of remorse when your conduct falls short of your values is a natural, healthy response of a conscience that cares deeply. It holds its own valid purpose, much like the cool mountain water that washes away loose grit from the quarry floor after a long day of cutting stone. Experiencing an honest pang of regret simply shows that your inner moral sense is alive, responsive, and oriented toward goodness. When a genuine mistake or an awkward reaction occurs in your daily life, a simple, unavoidable pain touches your heart. That initial prick of regret carries its own authentic truth, like a single rough stone edge waiting to be rounded by time. It asks for gentle acknowledgement, quiet humility, and an honest attempt to make amends where possible. Living as a human being in a complex world means that moments of clumsy communication or temporary fatigue will naturally happen as we walk our path. Yet observe closely what happens inside your mind during the long, dark hours when you lie awake, trying to punish yourself for that slip. This is where the exhausting, crushing weight of spiritual perfectionism constructs its heaviest prison. Driven by an intense fear that our human roughness makes us unlovable or corrupt, our mind begins to demand an artificial polish. We force our tired thoughts to replay the incident dozens of times, mentally drafting cold internal prosecutions, and scold ourselves furiously for failing to act like an enlightened saint. We take a natural passing moment of human clumsy behavior and turn it into a permanent internal tribunal, grinding our spirit with aggressive self-criticism until our inner frame feels thin and ready to snap. This exhausting effort to grind away our natural mineral lines is what ancient wisdom recognizes as the primary source of our deepest spiritual burnout. In our modern daily lives, this internal strain is not an abstract concept. It is that sore throat and heavy chest at midnight after hours of internally interrogating your own motives. It is the overwhelming, false conviction that if you stop scolding yourself right now, you will lose your moral compass and become a terrible person. Consider what actually happens when you force your mind to run a cold trial over past mistakes. The initial slip was a simple, brief event in time, asking only for a soft, practical shift when tomorrow arrives. But by insisting that your spirit must be gouged and scraped until no human grain remains visible, your mind creates an immense secondary agony. The initial mistake was merely a single rough texture on the rock. Your relentless self-prosecution, your inner insults, and your shame over your own human roughness are the heavy, suffocating grit created entirely by your refusal to let the unpolished stone rest. Profound spiritual reflection shows us that most of the suffocating exhaustion you carry tonight does not come from your actual mistakes. It grows from the unrelenting, guarded demand that you must never show a single rough edge, mineral vein, or moment of fatigue. It comes from treating your natural human grain as a disgraceful flaw, rather than the raw, structural material through which your real strength develops. The dark veins inside your nature carry no power to destroy your worth, but kneeling in the dark while frantically scraping your own heart will always leave your spirit bruised and bleeding. When we cultivate a soft, unhurried presence toward our actual human state, we are not abandoning goodness, nor are we inviting moral decay. True spiritual maturity is simply the quiet, brave willingness to let your unpolished stone be intact as it is. It is the willingness to notice the familiar urge to reach for the bronze polishing chisel and to whisper softly to yourself, "My heart is allowed to carry natural grain right now, and this human roughness does not mean I am broken." When you set down the bronze tool and allow your awareness to rest on the broad bedrock beneath you, an immense soothing relief washes through your entire frame. This is the profound comfort of true self-forgiveness made real in your spirit. Self-compassion means recognizing that a broad slab of raw mountain slate, holding its mineral veins in quiet integrity, possesses a dignity that 1,000 polished fragments could never match. When you stop fighting the natural texture of your humanity, the terrifying, shame-filled stories about your corruption vanish, dissolving into the dark, quiet stone of your present room. The unpolished slate holds its load faithfully, not because it succeeded in looking like clear glass, but because it allowed its organic layers to remain whole, textured, and real. The heaviest iron hammer can strike its surface, but the raw stone beneath absorbs the blow with quiet, effortless resilience. In the exact same way, when you stop forcing your mind to scrub away its human roughness, your spirit recovers its natural, unshakable foundation. The need to compulsively judge every internal thought falls away, leaving a grounded, peaceful presence that knows how to hold both light and shadow with equal grace. This grounded, uncarved presence is your true, enduring sanctuary. It was never created by a flawless behavioral record, nor was it diminished when your patience faltered during a busy hour. The spacious awareness inside you that observes your perfectionist shame is completely unmarred by the mistakes themselves. It remains deep, quiet, and steady, like the rich quarry granite resting undisturbed beneath a mountain night. Offering soft reverence to your real, unvarnished nature is not a surrender to carelessness. True trust in your life is simply the willingness to inhabit the solid bedrock of this present hour, trusting that the organic strength of your spirit knows how to learn, adapt, and grow without the aid of a whip. It is the quiet courage to say, "My life contains many natural grain lines, and I will let my stone be unpolished tonight." Slowly, a deep, restorative understanding settles into your bones. You begin to see that dropping your internal prosecution is not an act of moral failure. It is the natural, noble return of a soul coming home to its own sacred ground. Surrendering the exhausting struggle to appear flawless is not a defeat. It is the quiet doorway to discovering the timeless peace that has always lived within your uncarved heart. As you lie here in the soft shelter of your bed, feeling the broad mattress holding your spine, you can feel how close this inner ease really is. It does not require you to become a flawless saint overnight, nor does it demand that you erase your history before you are allowed to rest. It requires only a soft moment of permission, a gentle loosening of your tight jaw, allowing your spirit to settle into the raw, unpolished stone of this hour under a quiet, starlit sky. In a short while, we will practice a very simple way of feeling this cool, load-bearing slate within your own physical frame. But even right now, as you listen to these gentle words, notice how your lungs expand and release without asking for an artificial polish. Your breath moves softly through the dark, supported by the calm air of the room, natural, textured, and completely whole, exactly as you are. Now, if it feels comfortable for your physical body in this quiet space, permit your frame to yield gently into the mattress beneath you. There is no rigid posture you must hold, and no forced alignment you need to maintain tonight. You might let your arms rest loosely along your sides, Or perhaps place one open hand over your lower ribs, wherever your muscles feel most unburdened. If your eyes are still hovering open, perhaps you can let your eyelids drift shut, inviting the cool dark of the room to envelop your vision. Nothing in this slather-scented space is asking you to prove your purity, grind away your roughness, or present a polished face for anyone. Draw a slow, unhurried breath in through your nose, letting the cool air expand your chest, and then let it release softly through your mouth, allowing your body weight to sink into the bed like a heavy slab of uncarved quarry slate settling into damp earth. You do not need to count your inhalations or regulate their cadence. Simply permit your torso to rise and fall the way cold mountain spring water flows quietly over raw river stones, steady, unforced, and completely at ease with every quiet exhale. Perhaps you can feel a subtle loosening in the strained muscles around your cheeks, your jaw, your temples, and the delicate space behind your throat. If a heavy knot of moral shame or perfectionist doubt remains locked in your chest, that is completely fine as well. You do not need to push that feeling away or force it to transform into saintly peace. Even noticing that old urge to scrape at your own character without judging yourself is a moment of deep, gentle restoration. As you rest here in the cool darkness, allow your attention to turn softly toward one specific moment today where you felt you fell short of your own high standards. It might be a quick flash of anger, a clumsy word spoken in haste, or a silent moment where you felt impatient and then scolded yourself for being imperfect. Do not try to re-examine your motives right now. And do not attempt to force a spiritual lesson onto your memory before morning comes. Simply let that feeling of imperfection sit quietly in the dark space of your awareness, like a rough grain line running through raw stone. Perhaps you can give a very soft, silent name to what your spirit is experiencing. You might whisper to yourself, "This is the exhaustion of trying to be flawless." Or perhaps, "This is my mind trying to grind away my natural humanity." By naming this internal pattern with a gentle, forgiving voice, you step back from the edge of self-rebuke. You begin to observe the harsh prosecutor odds without letting it drag your heart into deeper trial. Now, if it feels right, bring to your mind's eye the image of a broad, cool slab of raw mountain slate marked by dark organic mineral veins resting safely upon the earth inside the quiet quarry shed. Picture its unpolished texture, its dark gray tone, and its solid, unyielding thickness. Smell the surrounding atmosphere of wet granite dust, fresh pine shavings, wild moss, and cold spring water drifting through the quiet shed air. Imagine taking that heavy, exhausting bronze chisel of self-criticism, along with the sharp, biting grit of your internal verdicts, and placing them gently into a small brass water bowl sitting on the workbench beside the stone. You do not need to throw your self-judgment away with anger, nor do you need to scrub your skin until it stings. You simply permit the bronze tool to rest quietly beneath the clear water, watching the fine white stone dust settle down to the bottom of the bowl until the water above becomes completely still, clear, and quiet. Watch what happens in your imagination when the polishing tools are set aside and the water settles. Picture the raw, unpolished mountain slate resting across the oak timber blocks with quiet, effortless dignity. You do not need to force its surface to reflect light like a mirror. You simply watch the dark, textured stone resting securely in the dim oil lamp glow, solid, uncarved, and completely capable of holding immense weight without cracking or splintering along its mineral lines. Notice how the cold alpine wind whispers softly through the timber roof slats, touching the unpolished stone without any resistance. The wind does not break the slate, it simply glides over the raw surface, while the dark rock beneath remains completely steady, broad, and safe. If your mind strays back into its old habit of auditing your behavior or trying to draft defensive arguments for tomorrow, there is no need to feel disappointed in yourself. Your mind has been trying to protect you from judgment for a very long time, and old habits of moral perfectionism do not vanish in a single night. Whenever you catch yourself reaching for the bronze chisel again, simply notice that movement with a soft, forgiving heart. You can quietly say to yourself, "My mind is trying to grind the slate again." And then imagine letting your gaze return to that uncarved stone resting in the quiet shed once more. You can return to this cool, unpolished bedrock whenever you are ready. as many times as you need tonight. There is no spiritual exam you must pass before you are permitted to fall asleep. You do not need to resolve the mystery of your human flaws, nor do you need to demonstrate that you are morally unbreakable before dawn arrives. Healing your relationship with your true nature is not a sudden event where all mistakes vanish forever. It is a series of quiet hidden moments where you choose to set down the bronze chisel and permit your raw stone to hold its grain. Even a single breath spent honoring your uncarved truth permits your nervous system to taste the deep safety that lives beyond perfectionist fear. Feel the easy, natural movement of your chest continuing its silent work in the dark. Cool air fills your lungs, lifting your ribs slightly, and flows out with a long, soft fall. The solid weight of your head, your shoulders, and your legs is completely supported by the bed beneath you. You do not need to be a saint tonight. You do not need to prove to the world that you are flawless. The mattress is holding you. The room is enclosing you. And the raw, unpolished bedrock of this present hour is completely deep enough to carry your rest. In a short while, we will travel deeper into the mountain sanctuary, where a pathway keeper shows how an ancient slate trail fits together with unforced seams that let the mountain rain drain naturally. But for now, allow yourself to remain right here in your bed. Let the cool, uncarved surface of the slate rest quietly behind your eyes. Let your jaw remain loose and your hands soft upon the sheets, knowing that nothing needs to be polished, nothing needs to be forced, and that your unpolished heart is completely safe enough to rest tonight. Farther up the stone-fitting courtyard behind the main temple hall, where the mountain path curved toward the ancient shrine, the night air smelled of crushed damp granite, wet slate grit, wild mountain thyme, and cold alpine mist. Working as a pathway builder in this secluded courtyard was a young stone fitter named Yori, who suffered under a deep, suffocating terror of moral clumsiness. Yori was tasked with fitting hand-cut slate steps into the courtyard walk. He believed that if the gaps between the flagstones were not mathematically invisible, the path would be ruined, exposing his own inner sloppiness to every passing pilgrim. This fear transformed Yori's craft into an obsessive, exhausting torment. Every evening, long after the other builders had returned to their sleeping quarters, Yori remained in the stone courtyard under a dim oil lantern. In his cold hands, he carried a heavy iron stone gauge frame fitted with 2 brass thumb screws. He used this tool to measure the precise clearance between adjacent slate steps, tightening the brass screws to check if a single hair could pass between the edges. On a freezing midnight, as a thick frost settled over the granite flagstones, Yori reached a breaking point of total emotional collapse. A heavy autumn rainstorm earlier in the week had caused the ground beneath the path to settle naturally, shifting several newly laid slate steps by a fraction of an inch. When Yori applied his iron gauge to the seam between 2 broad steps, the brass thumb screws jammed. The gap was slightly wider on one side, a completely natural result of the mountain earth breathing under the weight of wet weather. To Yori's mind, this small, natural gap was an intolerable disaster that proved his own spiritual unworthiness. A wave of intense self-rebuke flooded his throat in a frantic attempt to force the heavy stones into seamless perfection. He seized a steel-cold chisel and began hacking furiously at the raw slate edges. He struck the metal with desperate, heavy blows, trying to chisel away the natural stone shoulders until the gap closed completely. The steel bit slipped against the wet slate. Sparks flew into the freezing air as the metal gouged deeply into the stone face, leaving a jagged, ugly scar across the dark slate. Blood welled from Yori's knuckles where the hammer grazed his skin. Mixing with the dark stone grit on the wet ground, Yori dropped his hammer into the mud. He sat back on his heels, trembling, his lungs burning from cold air and stone dust. He looked at the scarred flagstone, his own blood dripping onto the damaged edge, and felt entirely hollowed out by despair. He believed he had ruined the sacred path forever, proving that his hands were too clumsy and his spirit too flawed to create anything of lasting value for the sanctuary. Walking slowly through the misted courtyard, carrying a wooden bucket of warm water and a clean linen cloth, was Mother Rin, an elder sanctuary pathway keeper who had cared for these mountain trails for over 40 years. Mother Rin wore a simple dark gray robe woven from coarse hemp, her silver hair wrapped in a plain cloth. She walked with a quiet, grounded cadence that seemed to match the ancient rhythm of the mountain itself. She had watched Yoris Latinite's struggles with the iron gauge for many nights, waiting for the young builder's rigid perfectionism to meet its natural boundary. Motherin set down her wooden bucket near the scarred stone step, stepping quietly onto the damp slate. She did not scold Yori for damaging the step, nor did she offer a light, cheerful distraction about how the mark would fade. Instead, she knelt beside the bleeding young man in the cold mist, dipped the linen cloth into the warm water, and gently washed the stone grit and blood from his knuckles. When his hands were clean, Motherin picked up the heavy iron stone gauge frame with its jammed brass thumbscrews. She held it out toward Yori, asking him to look closely at its rigid metal jaws. Motherin asked Yori to take the iron gauge and lay it across an ancient slate path nearby, a walkway laid by mountain masons 2 centuries ago that stretched toward the upper grove. Yori took the iron frame with cold, shaking fingers. He walked a few paces down the old path and set the metal gauge across the seam between 2 ancient flagstones. The gap between the old stones was wide, uneven, and filled with dark, living moss. The iron gauge could not even span the space. Its rigid brass jaws hung uselessly over the mossy gap. Motherin walked over and stood beside him in the quiet mist. She asked Yori to observe how the ancient path held the weight of hundreds of travelers every year, remaining solid, beautiful, and completely steady through 200 winters. Motherin pointed down at the mossy gap between the old stones. She explained that if those ancient masons had forced the stones together without any room to breathe, the winter frost freezing in the earth beneath would have shattered every flagstone. Within a single season, the open, unforced seams were the very reason the path survived. They allowed the mountain rain to drain naturally into the deep soil, giving the heavy stones room to shift and settle without breaking under the frost. Motherin touched Yora's arm gently, her hand warm against his cold sleeve. She told the young fitter that his suffocating agony came from treating his own life like an iron gauge. When he attempted to eliminate every natural gap, every human mistake, and every emotional shift, he was trying to build a path out of rigid iron that could never survive the winter. True integrity, she whispered, is not a path without seams, but the quiet wisdom to leave room for the mountain earth to move. Yori stood motionless on the ancient walkway, his hand resting on the mossy stone, feeling the cool mountain mist against his face. A deep, quiet shift took place within his chest. He took one long, slow breath, letting the cold air clear his throat, and felt the tight, agonizing knot in his stomach loosen its grip. He did not magically transform into a master who would never feel a moment of self-doubt again. The scarred stone step was still marked, his knuckles still throbbed, and the cold winter was still settling over the peak. But in that quiet, unhurried moment, Yori made one small, vital choice. He chose to stop treating his own human mistakes as evidence of an unforgivable defect. He picked up the iron stone gauge frame, walked over to the edge of the courtyard, and set the metal tool down on a wooden shelf behind the tool shed. He returned to the scarred flagstone, picked up a small piece of dark slate grit, and gently smoothed the sharp edges around the mark, allowing the stone to remain textured, open, and whole, exactly as the mountain earth had shaped it tonight. The picture of Yori setting down his iron gauge and leaving an unforced seam between those ancient steps reveals a profound truth about how we build our heaviest daily burdens. So much of our Latinite exhaustion comes from this relentless habit of forcing an iron measurement onto a living, breathing landscape. We take a natural human awkwardness, a momentary loss of patience, an unthinking word, or a brief spell of fatigue, and transform it into a terrifying verdict on our whole character. We convince ourselves that if we just scold ourselves a little harder, replay our mistakes 10 more times, or force our speech to be completely flawless, we can somehow prevent our lives from ever showing a single rough edge. This desperate urge to erase our natural seams is often driven by a subtle terror of our own perceived unworthiness. When a small mistake occurs, our internal court convenes immediately. We replay old moments where our vulnerability was met with judgment, scold ourselves furiously for not being spiritually unbreakable, and attempt to fix our present flaws by dragging a heavy cloud of shame over our ribs. We begin to view our natural human clumsiness as an embarrassing personal corruption, turning our mistakes into our very identity. We stop experiencing ourselves as solid, load-bearing stone capable of holding weight, and begin viewing our spirit as a fragile, damaged object that must be constantly scraped and polished for public approval. Yet this habit of pressing a heavy cold chisel against our own raw surface is a form of quiet violence that turns simple clumsiness into suffocating agony. When you refuse to let your uncarved slate rest in peace, you are secretly operating from a deep self-rejection. You begin to define yourself through your perfectionist standards alone, turning your inner prosecutor into a heavy garment that prevents your heart from taking a single honest breath. You stop tasting the quiet peace of the evening or hearing the soft rain outside because your entire focus is consumed by the sharp, stinging stone dust of your own internal trials. Buddhist reflection offers a gentle, unhurried mirror that exposes this subtle trap without any scolding or judgment. It asks us to look closely at the vital difference between the natural weather life brings and the heavy, extra suffering our own minds construct through resistance, control, and self-blame. Living in a human body means that cold autumn winds will naturally wash through your valley, bringing moments of fatigue, awkwardness, or quiet regret. Those brief events are simple, neutral realities inside a vast, changing landscape. However, the agonizing, hollow burnout that keeps your throat tight at midnight is not the passing event itself. It is the extra misery created by your decision to gouge your own surface with a cold chisel, blinding your own eyes with stone dust because you are terrified of showing a seam. It is like a stone fitter who stands in a quiet courtyard during a mountain rainstorm, and instead of letting the earth drain naturally through the open seams, frantically hacks at the slate edges, weeping because his hands are bleeding and scarred. The cool mountain mist touching the courtyard flagstones is the primary reality of the pass. The bleeding knuckles, jammed iron tools, and bitter shame are the secondary suffering created entirely by his refusal to let the rock settle as it is. Peace does not arrive when you somehow manage to eliminate every natural gap from your character. Real freedom begins the very second you lay down the iron gauge, stop hacking at your own rough edges, and allow your bare hands to touch the cool, mossy seams of your actual present state. The unpredictable events of your life will come and go as they always have. You can offer genuine care to others, learn from your mistakes, and move with practical grace. But gouging your own heart will never make your spirit any stronger. Consider how much of your internal weight comes from attempting to force a rigid, iron perfection upon a heart that simply needs room to expand and contract. We collapse into Latinite exhaustion because we falsely believe that admitting our human roughness is a dangerous defeat. But your true nature is not a brittle, over-polished piece of glass that shatters under the slightest blow. Your spirit is like the vast, accommodating mountain quarry itself, deep, solid, and broad, holding every natural vein and every quiet shadow, without losing its timeless root in the bedrock. When you surrender the impossible demand to appear unbroken, a massive weight dissolves from your chest. The tight, strained muscles around your cheeks, jaw, and throat, which have been locked for months to maintain an unblemished presentation, can finally begin to soften. Your lungs find room to draw a long, unhurried breath of cool mountain air. You begin to understand that offering your heart an unforced seam, allowing your life to rest safely in its unpolished integrity without being forced into an artificial gauge, is not an act of shameful surrender. It is the fundamental foundation of true spiritual peace. You are fully permitted to be a broad, load-bearing slab of mountain slate that holds its weight, rather than a strained performer scraping raw timber for applause. Your value as a living soul was never tied to the total absence of mistakes or the flawless polish of your past. You were born with an ancient, quiet resilience, fully equipped to receive every mountain storm, capable of supporting deep paths within your raw earth tonight. As you lie here in the dark, feeling the cool air move softly across your face, notice when your mind attempts to pull you back into its old iron gauge habits. It might whisper that you need to be perfectly calm tomorrow, or that you must hide your clumsiness to keep others happy. Observe that thought with soft, unhurried presence. You do not need to fight the thought, nor do you need to pick up a single chisel for it. You can simply view it as a stray leaf, drifting past a quiet quarry window, carrying no power to disturb the deep, solid bedrock resting beneath your bed. This wisdom of placing bare palms against cool, unpolished slate, letting the natural seams of mountain stone breathe without forcing an iron gauge over the rock, belongs directly inside the small, demanding moments of your daily routine. It finds its truest purpose during those quiet hours, when your mind starts frantically trying to grind away your human roughness. Consider how easily this habit of moral perfectionism shows up on a completely ordinary afternoon. You sit at your desk or walk through a crowded room, carrying an aching heavy weight inside your chest from a brief moment where your patience faltered. Someone looks up from their desk, offering a casual greeting or asking how your project is progressing. A sudden spike of alarm hits your throat. Instead of allowing your voice to be quiet, neutral, or simply human, your muscles react on instinct. You force a wide, bright smile onto your face, projecting an energetic laugh that rings hollow against your ribs, desperately trying to prove that you are flawlessly calm and spiritually unbroken, feeling your jaw muscles throb with tension long after they walk away. In that exact moment, when you adjust your demeanor for an observer, you are grinding a bronze chisel against dark mineral veins. But wisdom offers you a quiet, spacious choice before you pick up the metal tool. You can let your shoulders drop down toward your hips. You can take one slow breath, allowing your facial muscles to relax into neutral stillness, and answer with a simple, quiet sentence that requires no performative holiness. Choosing not to grind away your natural human fatigue for a passerby is how you let an unforced seam remain between the flagstone. It is a brave, quiet decision to let your uncarved stone hold its weight, refusing to exhaust your spirit simply because a brief moment of roughness showed through your surface. Or think about those heavy evenings when you carry an exhausting guilt for wanting rest without earning it through total spiritual perfection. You lie down after a long, demanding day, feeling a profound weariness in your bones, yet the moment your head hits the pillow, an internal prosecutor begins to audit your character. It compares your spiritual progress to people online, who seem to be perpetually patient, scolds you for feeling irritable, and insists that taking time to rest without an unblemished record is a dangerous sign that you are failing as a person. You scroll through your phone, checking messages for reassurance, searching for a sign that you are enough, while a dark storm of self-judgment churns behind your eyes. When those waves of perfectionist shame threaten to steal your night, you can choose to stop treating your human roughness as a disgraceful crime. You do not need to prove your spiritual value by scraping your heart until it bleeds. You can allow your awareness to settle like broad quarry slate, receiving a mountain mist holding its raw texture without apologizing for its grain. Giving yourself full permission to turn off the screen, to decline an extra task when your heart feels heavy, or to lie still in the dark without offering a polished explanation, is how you permit your living stone to rest upon its natural bedrock. Notice too how often this fear of being seen as flawed or clumsy leaks into your relationships and your sense of self-worth. You wait for a text message from someone you care deeply about, and when the hours pass in silence, your mind immediately assumes that your clumsy words have ruined the connection, or that your unpolished self is inherently unlovable and defective. You feel a frantic compulsion to send a carefully drafted apology, replaying recent conversations, trying to control their perception of you, treating your bond like a fragile piece of glass that will shatter if you show a single seam. Yet the ancient stone walkway leading up the mountain pass does not earn its right to carry travelers by pretending it has no gaps between the steps. It anchors its presence firmly in the earth, precisely because its raw flagstones were permitted to settle with natural, unforced seams, letting the rainwater drain freely without cracking the stone under winter frost. Peace is not a reward granted only to those who possess a perpetually saintly heart. Peace is the fundamental, quiet foundation that emerges when you stop treating your human grain as an intolerable defect. Giving yourself unconditional permission to lie flat in this dark room tonight, without polishing over your fatigue or defending your mistakes, is how you align your spirit with the deep wisdom of the quarry. Living this path in your modern life does not mean you abandon kindness toward others or become careless and cold. It expresses itself in the softest, most practical choices of your day. It is taking a gentle breath before scolding yourself for a minor mistake. It is choosing to put down your phone when your mind demands you check for approval. It is the quiet, steady realization that your heart is not a fragile piece of glass waiting to shatter, but a broad, resilient slab of mountain slate that knows how to carry both weight and texture in peace. You do not need to master this uncarved honesty by tomorrow morning. The Zen path is not about instantly erasing every old habit of self-prosecution that made you reach for the chisel in the past. It is simply about noticing the moment your fingers tighten around the metal tool out of panic, and gently choosing to lay the bronze blade on the sawdust floor instead. When you practice living as raw, load-bearing slate rather than a strained performer scraping wood for applause, your daily life recovers a quiet, unshakable dignity. You can offer simple care to those around you, moving through your day with an unhurried rhythm, and then step back into your uncarved center when the sun goes down. You step out of the exhausting role of the courtroom prosecutor, returning to your true nature as a wise pathway builder who knows how to let the raw stone rest upon the earth. As these late hours settle softly over your room right now, allow these simple truths to cool the remaining friction in your nerves. You have carried enough heavy iron tools through misted courtyards today. You have gouged your own surface enough to satisfy your mind's perfectionist demands. The long day of monitoring your tone, replaying your mistakes, and fearing your own roughness has fully retreated into the dark. The night has opened a vast, peaceful sanctuary around your bed, offering a shelter where no character needs to be polished, no stone needs to be gouged, and no heart needs to be ashamed. Feel the easy, natural movement of your chest continuing its silent work in the dark. Cool air fills your lungs, lifting your ribs slightly, and flows out with a long, soft fall. You are completely permitted to set down your bronze chisels and iron stone gouges for the night. You are allowed to let every perfectionist trial, every comparative worry, and every fear of your own clumsiness dissolve into the wide, dark stillness outside your room. The solid, unmoving bedrock beneath your home is holding you, broad and strong, ready to support your entire weight without asking for a single polished line tonight now. Let every bronze stone polishing chisel, every iron stone gouge frame, and every box of brass thumbscrews fade quietly into the dark alpine shadows of the mountain quarry. The quiet journeys of Taro holding his raw, unbroken flagstone in Yori, leaving an unforced mossy seam between ancient steps, have completed their steady work within your spirit. They are no longer distant parables told beside a misted courtyard, but are soaking down like cold mountain spring water, sinking into deep granite bedrock, settling into the subterranean depths of your awareness. The frantic demand to scrape away your human roughness has stopped. The iron tools have been set down on the wooden shelf. The ancient slate path rests quiet in total darkness, leaving your hands soft, cool, and resting unburdened upon the sheets. Your physical body is becoming deeply, delightfully heavy against the steady mattress beneath you. Feel your shoulders, your ribs, and your hip bones yielding their last subtle guard, sinking half an inch deeper into the soft bedding. Your eyelids feel weighted, smooth, and completely relaxed, as if a gentle mist of damp granite dust and wild mountain thyme had brushed up over your forehead, clearing away every remaining trace of white stone grit and perfectionist strain. The subtle tightness around your jaw, throat, and lower ribs dissolves completely, allowing your airway to open into an easy, spacious passage where cool night air moves softly, carrying no need to audit your character or defend a single human flaw tonight. Every breath you draw now is growing slower, softer, and completely silent. A quiet stream of air enters, lifting your chest like cold spring water rising gently over uncarved river slate, and then glides out like alpine mist passing over raw mountain ledges. Inhale, slow, smooth, and effortless. Exhale, long, quiet, and uncalculated. You are not measuring the spiritual polish of your heart. You are simply letting your living frame breathe itself, natural, unforced, and completely content upon its present bedrock. Picture a small mason's cottage built beside a quiet slate quarry on a high mountain slope at midnight. Outside, A gentle alpine breeze rustles softly through wild pine needles, carrying the quiet scent of fresh pine shavings, wet granite dust, and cold mountain fog. Deep within the stone shelter, a quiet oil wick flame glows softly in its clay holder, casting a warm amber pool over raw, uncarved slate flagstones. There are no bronze chisels scraping stone, no iron gauges measuring gaps, and no winter frosts cold enough to crack the broad slate ledges resting outside. The high quarry rests quiet, steady, and fully enclosed under a vast starlit sky, holding its raw mineral veins in dark, unpolished safety. Inside your own chest, that exact same uncarved, grounded stillness is quietly resting right now. The sharp, cold panic over moral clumsiness and internal flaws has dissolved into the night air. It has drifted out through the timber roof slats, carried away into the vast mountain night, where no human heart needs to become clear glass to be whole right now. You do not need an unblemished behavioral record to step into tomorrow. You do not need to eliminate every human grain line to deserve deep rest. The vast night is broad enough to enclose every rough texture, and quiet enough to let your unpolished stone rest without making a single calculation. Feel the deep heaviness in your thighs, knees, and ankles, melting into the supportive bed beneath you. Feel your feet and toes resting motionless upon the sheets, completely freed from the long days of pacing courtyards and scolding your own clumsy steps. There are no ethical trials you must face in this dark room tonight, no internal verdicts you must execute, and no human roughness heavy enough to pull the solid bedrock from beneath your feet right now. You have returned home to the quiet, uncarved stone that was always yours. Give your mind total permission to drop its long, exhausting prosecution over your life. You do not have to solve the mystery of your personal flaws. You do not need to guarantee a saintly demeanor before morning comes. Those distant trials belong to the sunrise outside, and you are resting far inside the quiet mason's cottage now, where bronze chisels hold no purpose and scraping raw slate is no longer required. If a stray thought about a past mistake or an unthinking word floats through the dark, let it be like a single grain of stone dust drifting across wet slate, touching the granite briefly before blowing out into the night. You do not need to pick up the chisel. You do not need to force an iron gauge over it. You can simply watch the mountain mist pass over the stone, leaving your raw, uncarved bedrock calm, warm, and completely undisturbed. The night has built a quiet, impenetrable sanctuary around your bed, protecting your spiritual weariness from the relentless judgments and perfectionist demands of the world outside. The morning will arrive in its own time, bringing its own light and its own gentle step to your feet. But tonight belongs entirely to rest. Tonight is a sacred sanctuary where your spirit is permitted to set down its iron tools, wipe its dust-covered fingers, and sink into the rich, unhurried ease of its present unpolished stone. You are safe here in the quiet dark. Your life knows how to hold its weight without an artificial polish. Your hands know how to rest without gripping a hammer. Your core spirit knows how to heal when the mind finally stops scraping the slate and lets the raw stone rest in peace. Let yourself sink down through the soft, dark layers of sleep, floating down into the deep, quiet bedrock where no courtroom exists, where no stone is gouged, and where your true nature rests forever raw, uncarved, and profoundly at peace. When the mountain frost settles over the ancient slate path at midnight, does the unpolished stone ever weep because a dark mineral vein runs through its heart? The quiet silence of the slate quarry deepens into every corner of your dark room, carrying an ancient, untroubled stillness that cradles your frame. In the soft darkness, the raw slate flagstones resting along the mountain pass do not worry about the frost gathering along their textured edges, nor do they panic over the uncarved mineral veins running through their core. They rest quietly in their natural depth, waiting for nothing, demanding no artificial polish to justify their presence, and needing no iron gauge to prove their right to exist. When you stop treating your human roughness like a disgraceful defect that must be scraped away through relentless self-criticism, your mind returns to that same unbothered, ancient innocence. The small mistakes and clumsy moments you experience today were not signs of spiritual corruption. They were simply the natural, textured expressions of a living human life, leaving your core presence completely untouched, resilient, and whole. Consider how a single uncarved slab of mountain slate resting in a high pass does not stand alone, nor does it need to transform its dark gray grain into clear glass to fulfill its purpose. Its living duty is held completely intact within its organic composition, holding its quiet capacity to bear weight and support every traveler who steps across its surface. When you look upon your journey without the heavy dust of perfectionist shame, you begin to see that every trail you have walked was crossed step by step. The moments of fatigue, the hasty words, the unexpected emotional shifts, and even the periods of deep self-doubt have all been met by your innate resilience. They have not left you ruined or broken. They have revealed your capacity to learn, your depth of conscience, and your quiet ability to keep walking with an honest heart. Allow your physical frame to yield even deeper into this sheltered sanctuary tonight. Feel the broad, steady support of the mattress beneath you, holding your shoulders, your spine, your lower back, and your hips in complete unconditional safety. Your lungs move air in a long, peaceful cadence, like the soft, rhythmic trickle of cold spring water flowing quietly over raw river stones. There is no need to audit your motives or examine your character in the dark. There is no need to prove your spiritual purity before the sun appears. Time is moving softly, not as a harsh judge examining your flaws, but as a quiet stream carrying you into deeper restoration. You can let your internal prosecution drop its sharp verdict completely. You can let your thoughts uncurl softly, like fine stone dust settling to the bottom of a clear water bowl. The dark air surrounding your bed is cool, dry, and completely undisturbed. It carries no moral courtrooms, no cold chisels, and no iron gauges for you to defend before morning arrives in this quiet sanctuary. You are not a defendant who must prove their innocence, nor an apprentice who must polish away every natural grain line. You are simply a living presence, held safely upon a broad, interconnected earth that has sustained raw, unpolished life through unnumbered centuries. Everything that required your rigorous effort today has been set down outside the heavy quarry doors. The bronze chisel sits motionless on the sawdust floor. The iron gauge rests quiet on the tool shelf, and the thick mountain stone covers your heart in complete, unshakable ease. Think of how the mountain ridge outside your window holds its granite cliffs in night darkness without argument or shame. The uncarved rocks do not weep because their surfaces carry rough textures and dark mineral lines, nor do the alpine ledges fight the cool mist settling through the gorge. They yield to the natural night with quiet dignity, trusting that the mountain bedrock beneath them remains deep, strong, and completely unbroken. Your heart possesses that same innate wisdom. It knows how to yield to your human nature without losing its core integrity. It knows how to step into tomorrow while keeping its peace alive inside your chest. You do not need to force your spirit to become a flawless crystal. You need only to stop fighting the quiet, present bedrock that holds you right now. Let the soft weight of your head melt deeper into your pillow. Let your neck, your jaw, and the delicate muscles around your chest surrender every remaining trace of strain. Feel how quiet your breath has become, moving like a faint mountain breeze through high pine boughs, completely unhurried, peaceful, and smooth. Every inhalation brings cool, clean rest into your frame, and every exhalation releases the lingering urge to polish what is already whole. You are fully permitted to lay down your tools. You are allowed to be human, to be textured, and to let your unpolished heart rest in quiet peace while you sleep. As you drift closer to total sleep, feel the quiet comfort of knowing that your true value was never a paper-thin polish achieved through self-punishment. Your life is an unfolding noble journey, sustained by an inner bedrock of raw, load-bearing strength that no minor mistake can ever erase. The genuine care you have offered, the humility you have shown, and the quiet resilience you have forged are embedded in the very foundation of who you are right now. You carry their stability within your spirit, solid, calm, and enduring, like an ancient quarry that stands firm through every alpine winter. There is no trial left to conduct, no flaw left to grind away, and no perfectionist fear left to solve in the dark. The tools are still, the stone rests uncarved, and the room is wrapped in deep protective darkness. Let your awareness dissolve softly into the quiet stillness surrounding your bed. Let your body sink through the gentle layers of rest, supported by the broad, steady earth beneath your home. floating down into the deep, dark sanctuary of sleep. You are held, you are safe, and your unpolished spirit is completely at peace in the quiet night. The thick timber rafters above your head hold the quiet dark with gentle strength, shielding your rest from the cold alpine breeze that whispers through the high quarry outside. Beneath the solid roof, the air remains soft, still, and fragrant with the grounding scent of damp granite, fresh pine shavings, and wild mountain thyme. Every corner of this quiet space invites your body to step away from the world's demands, offering an unburdened sanctuary where no character is audited and no human roughness is judged. You do not need to verify the smoothness of your spirit, nor do you need to demonstrate your perfection for tomorrow. Simply resting here in the soft dark, feeling the natural rise and fall of your chest, is more than enough to nourish your weary frame. Notice how the soft cadence of your breathing matches the quiet stillness of the quarry shed. Inhaling softly brings cool, clean air into your lungs, and exhaling softly settles that air into the deep, grounded foundation of your physical body. With every quiet breath, your limbs grow heavier, your thoughts grow lighter, and the boundary between your awareness and the peaceful darkness around you begins to soften. You are surrounded by a vast, protective quiet that holds no fear of human flaws and no dread of the unknown. Everything is still, everything is resting, and the wide mountain sky above holds your life in complete, effortless safety. Let yourself float softly down into the dark, welcoming ocean of deep sleep. Feel your mind letting go of its last self-critical thoughts. Like fine stone dust settling into clear mountain water, there are no courtrooms waiting for you in the dark, no verdicts to execute, and no perfectionist panics to resolve before dawn arrives. You are resting within your own natural sanctuary, cradled in the deep, enduring peace of your own uncarved core. Sleep arrives naturally now, smooth, soft, and profound, carrying your tired spirit into total rest.